This is Walter Leite, and in this presentation I'll talk about mixed mode surveys, which is a strategic coordination of two or more survey modes. These are some of the objectives and advantages of mixed mode surveys. First, cost. It can be less expensive. So instead of, for example, doing a mail survey, if you combine internet and mail survey, it will be less costly. Obviously, it's more costly than just using internet survey, but you would reach a higher response rate. Coverage is also another reason to use mixed mode surveys. Your sampling frame may not have contact information to do an email survey. It may have some emails, it may have some addresses. Therefore, you may need a mixed mode survey for that. And also, some populations may be hard to reach with an internet survey, but you may be able to reach them with a mail survey or phone interviews. You may accommodate individuals with different lifestyles with a mixed mode survey, where a phone interview may be more feasible for some. And also, phone surveys may control for social desirability bias, because individuals may not want to, they may be more prone to provide social desirable responses, for example, for an internet survey or a phone survey, but less through a mail survey. However, there is a challenge that mixed mode surveys may not be comparable. So particularly if comparing an interviewed administered survey with self-administered surveys. So the main danger of mixed mode surveys is them not being equivalent, which is a validity problem. But they also may give different answers. So for example, phone survey questions may suffer from recency effect, which you remember more the options you heard more recently, while mail and internet surveys may suffer from primacy effects, where you remember the top options in multiple choice question strongly than the later options. There are four canonical use cases. The first is to contact in one mode, respond in another. So think about encouraging completion in one mode, such as sending a pre-notice letter by mail and then an internet survey. Now, this is not a true mixed mode survey. You can also collect different types of data. So, for example, you can have non-threatening questions with a phone interview, or threatening questions with a mail survey, because self-administered surveys are better for more threatening questions than interviewer-administered surveys. You can have sequential modes for different members of the sample. For example, you can have individuals in rural area receive a phone call for interview-administered survey, and individuals in urban areas receiving an email. And then you can have panel data, where you may start with a phone interview to build rapport and collect some information, and then follow up with mail and internet across time. These are some common combinations that usually balance response rates with cost. So the first one, pre-notice letter by mail, cover letter by mail, internet survey. Again, that's not a truly mixed mode survey, because data is actually being collected by internet. The last one, phone call mail survey, is one that you see where you have some recruitment questions, eligibility checks by phone, and then a more extensive mail survey later. So these improved response rates, they do not introduce measurement error when the data is collected by just one mode, and you can screen for eligibility in the first contact. But because it may increase costs, for example, if every time you're using phone calls, that is more costly because you have to pay for staff time. Collecting different data from the same respondent by different mode leverages the mode's strengths. So interview administered may get the complex information. Self-response surveys such as mail, the internet can cover sensitive information and less prone to social usability bias. There is some trade-off in attrition between modes. Some respondents may drop out before the second questionnaire, which may introduce no-response error. So for mixed mode surveys for collecting data from different members of the sample, this is a common strategy to deal with non-respondents. You begin with the least expensive mode, such as internet or mail, and then you follow up with sequentially more expensive modes. So if you start with internet, you can follow up by mail, and then for those that don't respond to mail, you follow up by phone. Okay. Now, there is another scenario where you split the sample and target specifically individuals that you either only have contact information by one mode or that you expect to have low response rates by one mode. So for example, maybe older individuals by mail, younger individuals by internet, or if you only have mails for rural area, you do a survey by mail, and if you have emails for other members, for those you send an email, and that increases coverage of the sampling frame because you're able to target using the mode that you have contact information for. Why might self-administered survey provide different responses than interview-administered ones? So there are three possible explanations. One is interview effects, such as social usability bias, acquiescence. The other one would be differences in processing of visual and oral information. And so things like primacy effects or recency effects. And the third would be question tailoring. The same question may appear visually dense on paper but appear verbally concise on the phone. Focusing on interview effects, Don Dillman shows that the mere presence of an interviewer can shift the distributions towards more socially desirable options. Respondents also invest more cognitive effort when there is someone actively listening, which improves data quality but lengthens the interviews. Unified mixed mode designs are surveys that are designed to be equivalent across administration modes, and they can minimize interviewer effects. Visual and oral processing differences matter even when word is identical. On a paper or web, answer categories are seen simultaneously. Over the phone, they are heard sequentially. Primacy and recency effects then apply. Also, self-administered respondents may skim stems and skip qualifiers, where interviewers listen to every word. Survey designers compensate by shortening stems, limiting options per screen and read aloud, or using cues to ensure that the answers are comparable. Question construction must acknowledge different modes, affordances. So common elements of self-administered surveys such as long stems, mark-all that apply questions, question matrices, and ranking should not be used if you are doing a mixed mode survey that combines self-administered surveys with interview-administered surveys. And for interview-administered surveys, you need to have short question stems, Likert scales that are very short or dichotomous, and you list all the options for another open-ended questions. For different approaches for mixed mode surveys, unified mode surveys is when you try to design a survey in a way that it's equivalent across interviewer and self-administered surveys. So, for example, in a unified mode survey, you would never use a matrix question, and you use more dichotomous questions like yes or no questions, and also you would use questions where if they are Likert, there are a smaller number of categories. Now, mode specific is when you are taking advantage of different capabilities of each mode, and that is helpful for mixed mode surveys where you are getting different types of data from the same respondent. So the same respondent is doing, for example, mail survey and then an interview. You can have open-ended questions that are in the interview administered survey, and then ranking questions or mark-all that apply questions in the mail or internet survey. And mode enhancement, is a combination of these features to improve the response, and allows you to, for the same respondent, to take advantage of the different affordances of each mode. So to choose your approach hinges on the philosophy of equivalence. So Dillman defines equivalence as the probability of eliciting a given response that's affected by mode. Unified surveys that's carefully executed can meet that standard. Mode enhanced cannot. So therefore, like when you are using mode enhancement, it's usually different types of data for the same respondents. But you have to be very careful with the mode effects.